Welcome back to pixelprojectradio. This is the final installment, for real this time, of us covering The Last of Us Part 1. Part 3 of Part 1. It's clear as mud. Once again, Last of Us aficionado, at least that's what I called him. He doesn't seem to think so. Last of Us expert, John from the Video Game Lounge podcast, joins me again. John, thank you for taking this journey with me. This has been a lot of fun. I knew as soon as I played this game that I wanted it to be on the show eventually, so I'm glad that you're here with me to talk through it.
Yeah, man, of course. I'm so happy that you asked me to come back for part 3. We got a lot of meat left on this bone, and can't wait to get into it, because there's some real meat and potatoes stuff, story-wise, here that we're about to get into. So I'm more than happy to be here, man.
Yeah, a lot happens in this last section of the game. So let's just dive right into it. There's a fair amount to cover still. We left off last time, right after the skirmish at the ranch, the house ranch, right after a particularly climactic moment with Ellie and Joel. We've been seeing their relationship sort of shift and change as the story has gone on, and that's going to continue here up until the climax of the story. So for now, let's take a trip. We're going all the way to the University of Eastern Colorado. There's a cut, because I can only imagine how long this would actually take to ride there, especially on horseback. But there's a little cut, it fades in. Ellie is learning about football from Joel. This is a dadism if I've ever seen one. It's terrific. And, you know, this got me thinking, I don't know of many other games, at least story-forward games, that largely take place on a university like this. I mean, you know, I'm thinking of like Bully, but that's more of an academy, I think, if I remember right. Do any other games feature prominently colleges or universities?
Not that
I'm sure they do.
I'm sure there has to be one. Like I'm kind of blanking on some other than like your annualized sports games, NCAA baseball, basketball, football, anything like that. But as far as a story-driven game, I am completely drawing a blank.
I liked it a lot. I really like this area of the game. I'm not sure, like, I feel like I'm maybe just pining for my academic days that are in my past. But I miss being on a quad, especially this time of year. As we record this in real time, it's November. And like this time of year being on a campus, that transition from fall into winter, I don't know, it's just a really special time. I really miss it.
Yeah, this is, in my opinion, one of the best set pieces in the game. I wouldn't say that it is necessarily open world, but it's certainly probably the biggest set piece in the game, and there's a lot to explore. It feels like a real university or college campus. University of Eastern Colorado does not exist, but the designers of this game were inspired by Colorado State University. And that was kind of the backdrop of this entire university, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, they could have fooled me. It's a very realistic looking place that they made here. So we're going to be making our way through this campus, this quad. It's mostly empty. There are little pockets of infected in some areas because, as we can see, there's a lot of environmental storytelling around here through which we can glean the events of the past. Some kids took off as the infection got particularly bad. Others stayed behind, and we can see bits and pieces of that get pieced together as we pick up lore from the notes, from the actual dorm rooms, which we get to explore. There are more little hidden Easter eggs here of like Jack and Daxter and PS3s too, which is always really nice. But navigating the wreckage and the occasional roadblocks and gates does require some rigging of power supplies and generators. It's pretty standard puzzling as far as The Last of Us is concerned.
Yeah, this is really cool world building and set pieces here. You get some dialogue as well between Joel and Ellie here where Ellie mentions that she wishes she could have been an astronaut, and she had asked Joel what he wanted to be, and he mentions a singer. And no spoilers, but I will say that both of these things get expanded upon in Last of Us Part 2. But really cool set pieces here. I really do enjoy this.
Yeah, that's right. I had almost forgotten. Part of me had wondered before we started this series, I was like, when did that astronaut scene take place? Was it in part 2? Was it in part 1? I love that scene. Super emotional, but we'll get there one day. There's a really blink and you miss it exchange here between Joel and Ellie. It's around the same time that they're talking about, Joel wanted to be a singer, which I love that. But he's explaining sort of what college is to Ellie.
Even though they were
And
all
he
grown up?
says,
Yeah, study, party, and find themselves. Figure out what they wanted to do with their lives.
What they wanted to do with their lives.
and Ellie just kind of trails off a bit forlorn and pensive, and she says what they want to do with their lives. And I feel so deeply for Ellie. She is an innocent youth in this whole landscape that has lost her future, potential squandered. And we see analogs to this in real life with children that don't always get the choices that we had or wish we could have had or what have you. It's a really tragic thing. There are a few things in this actual world that touch me so deeply as seeing the potential or the future of children get ripped away. And again, I have to call out once more the similarities to Lisa the Painful, another scenario where a young girl had her future taken away from her. If you haven't listened to that episode, listeners, or played the game, I highly encourage it. It's one of my favorites of all time. It's really fantastic.
Yeah, her kind of lost innocence here is it's heavy. It certainly weighs on you and tugs on the heartstrings, so to speak. It's it's a really cool. Maybe I shouldn't say cool. It's a really kind of heartbreaking moment. Just that Ellie is like, wow, people would plan their futures, and she's living day to day, hour by hour, minute to minute, almost in this fungal infected zombie apocalypse, and has no idea what that concept is. It's certainly heartbreaking.
And it's something we take for granted too, right? I mean, even folks like myself, whose career trajectory took a bit of a turn, we still had the option, right? This idea that we never had a choice for a lot of us, I would venture to say most of us, which is perhaps a bit of a privileged take, I understand, but I think most of us in the United States have that privilege. It's something that it's difficult to grasp and put yourself in the shoes of, to truly not have a choice in your future. And I don't suspect that, how to phrase this? I don't want to come off as inflammatory. I don't suspect that the large majority player base of gamers saw this scene and took active reflection time. Maybe I'm being too disingenuous to them, but I hope people do. I don't know. I don't mean to get so reflective and philosophical right at the jump of this, but it's something to think about for sure.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with you.
There are more infected as we get closer to the science building. Remember, that's our goal. That's where the fireflies are supposed to be holed up in. But for as many infected as we see, and as much roughage as we have to get through, wreckage, I should say, there's no sign of any people, no guards, no nothing, and it leaves us with this lingering question, what happened here?
Yeah, you come up upon the science building and you see that it was a triage area. A lot of tents and things that you find out here, a lot of medical equipment outside. You find some cool collectibles in the section before this as well. One was a logbook from a sniper outpost where they were detailing the comings and goings of people that they saw. You can also pick up a flamethrower outside here, which is really fun. One of the better weapons in the game. There is a lot happening here and seemingly no answers for what really went down in this area.
Yeah, and in addition to the collectibles, we can also find a lot of memos that sort of show the virus in more scientific detail. We get to see images, MRIs, I think, Wonder Machine pictures of the fungus growing on the brain, the cordyceps growing on the brain, things like that. This is also where this game brings voice memos into play, which is a real mainstay of horror and horror-adjacent genres that, thinking of Resident Evil and BioShock, things like that, coming in so late here. But, I suppose it makes sense. Why would anybody who wasn't a lab researcher or otherwise a professional have equipment like this? I don't know. There's one in particular that kind of made me laugh towards the end, but we'll get there. We get to hear a little bit about how the research into the virus went. We hear some spooky noises around. We think it might be fireflies. Ellie, throughout this whole time, is getting more and more antsy and anxious as to where these people are. The spooky noises are actually monkeys, which is awesome. Well, awesome for us as players. In the world, they were doing testing on the monkeys The monkeys got rambunctious because the doctors didn't want to put them down because they thought it would be inhumane. And the monkeys then ended up infecting the researchers, which is like, well, shit, damned if you do, damned if you don't, I guess.
Yeah, really cool. I remember playing this the first time and seeing the monkeys, and it was such a twist of expectation. I was thinking it was going to be infected or maybe at least someone alive, and for it to be monkeys, like, took this really tense moment and brought some levity and humor to it, which I thought was really cool. So this was certainly a shift in what I thought was going to happen, and I absolutely love the monkeys.
Yeah, we don't have to fight them or anything. They run away, so don't worry. No monkey fighting in this game. We'll eventually stumble onto a corpse in this room that's sort of sitting in a chair, and he's got one of the tape recorders with voice memos. Joel fast forwards through most of it. It's his last words, and Joel's just like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. The recorder at the end, though, it says that the rest of the researchers ended up leaving to go to St. Mary's Hospital in Salt Lake City to pursue their research. This particular researcher started to get hit with a bit of nihilism and believed that nothing was going to change. This wasn't important, so he stopped there. And I thought this voice sounded familiar. You've got a note here, John, that I didn't pick up on. But who is this fella?
Yeah, the voice memo is done by the great Steve Bloom. Most people know him from Cowboy Bebop or as Zeb Aurelios from Star Wars Rebels. He's also in Ben 10. He's also the voice of Wolverine in a lot of the Marvel games. So yeah, Steve Bloom kills it. This is a really cool just little section he has here.
Yeah, it's very neat. Very neat. I thought that he sounded familiar. I didn't put two and two together, though. We don't have much time to ruminate on this or to consider our options because hunters have arrived. I think this is the section, I might be wrong, but they shoot up into our window. They see us from afar. It's pretty cool. So they're going to storm the building. We've got to fight out. And during a scuffle, Joel gets sort of wrestled to the edge of a balcony. It's a very tense scene. It's a mashing button prompt, and we think Joel might fall over the edge. And he does escape the attacker, but he does indeed fall off the edge and gets impaled by a piece of rebar. And again, to The Last of Us's credit, I like how they do this. They always put these intense scenes without music to the point. So listening to the first and second episodes, especially if folks have listened to episodes in the past, I don't know, Lost Odyssey or such, you might be wondering oh, wow, there's not a lot of music playing in the background. Well, that's because The Last of Us doesn't always have music playing. A lot of the time, it keeps it deliberately non-cinematic because it wouldn't be. It takes that approach, similar to The Sopranos, and I love things that do that. I love a good drama. I grew up watching musical theater and opera. I love drama, but there's something cold and exciting about the lack of cinemacism here, and cinemacism's not the right word. I'm inventing words. Cinematography, cinematic elements, drama. It's exciting. But Joel has been impaled, and as he's losing blood, his consciousness starts fading. The camera will start to sort of dip in and out. Tunnel vision becomes much more prevalent. The music gets kind of drowned out like he's underwater. He uses the last of his wits to sort of shoot somebody down that's coming out behind Ellie, and here is where that relationship gets subverted. So remember the last episode, I believe it was, I mentioned that their relationship's a bit like the yin-yang, how Joel is the main protector, but Ellie sometimes steps in to help his ass. Now it's shifting around and inverting. Now Ellie is becoming Joel's protector, and we get to see just how capable, or I should say Joel gets to see just how capable she is. He gets her to pull him up, and now she's in charge. You trail behind her, limping and fading out of your senses all the way, and she is your only hope here.
Yeah, this is such a good moment. Ellie has a couple of Ellie-isms, I would say, in this section. where, you know, you as Joel, you're stumbling and fumbling around, because you have this gut wound basically, and as you mentioned, Rick, like your senses are kind of going in and out. The camera will fade kind of in and out. The whole sound design here is really cool. But Ellie has these lines where she asks Joel, like, "Can you move?" And he's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, then fucking move." I
love that. I love that line.
It's so Ellie. And then the last one is when they get almost all the way to the exit. She says, "If I get you out of this, you're totally singing for me." Call back to the earlier conversation of him saying he wants to be a singer, and she goes, "Okay." And then if you're still alive after this, you are fucking singing for me, and I love it.
Yeah, this section is showing us how capable Ellie is, showing us as players, but you know, we already know it's Joel who should be taking note. And of course, you know, he's literally fighting for his life, so he's not exactly going to remember this in great detail, but it's highlighting that Ellie is not the child that she has been portrayed to be throughout this whole time. She's not helpless. You know, what's the word? She's not the damsel in ennui that we see in so much fiction. She's capable. With a gun too. I mean, she really holds her own throughout here. It's pretty good. Yeah. It's pretty good for her. It's not looking good for Joel. His vision's not holding. The last thing he's able to do before he sort of passes out is he warns Ellie, he's, you know, look behind you. The vision becomes spotty, or camera becomes spotty, and sound fades as Ellie sort of takes them down. She gets Joel to the door and out of the building. I suppose this is kind of just saying that we went through. I wrote that it's striking how accelerated Ellie's progression through familial archetypes is. You know, many children grow to transition from the cared to the caretaker of their parents, at least in some small way. But Ellie is forced through the former due to the outbreak and through the latter with Joel's injury. And, you know, of course she's not ready, because who will be? Who would be, right? You know, at one point as they're leaving, Joel sort of falls and Ellie starts panicking. She's like, "Come on, you've got to tell me what to do. Like, what do I do, Joel? You've got to tell me." You know, her resources have been depleted. She only has so much bravery, as so do we all. And she is now beginning to succumb to feeling alone and scared.
Yeah, and it's also the first time in the game or throughout this story that Ellie wants some form of parental guidance or help. She's kind of just been this sort of typical teenager of like, okay, well, whatever, right, kind of attitude. And in this moment, she's like, "Oh shit, like I need someone to tell me what to do. Please tell me what to do." And it's such a perfectly acted scene. Ashley Johnson just nails it here. I love this.
And this takes us into the next season, Winter. Now, I've said before in the last episode, this is my favorite season of the entire game, for a couple reasons. And actually, when I first started it, I got frustrated on my first playthrough because of this opening section. So this is a total cut. It opens with Ellie hunting. This is actually the first scene I ever saw of this game in a Donkey video. There's like a cute little rabbit that hops up towards the camera, and he's like, "Oh, it's a little rabbit." And then boom, shot through the head with an arrow.
Love it.
It's a nice bit of black humor. It's grim. She just murks a rabbit, and you know she's about to pursue a buck. The buck is what frustrated me on my first playthrough, because you know, if you just try to shoot it down and like no nonsense, this is going to drag out for a long time. You've really got to be stealthy and plan your shots, and the arrow doesn't always shoot how you want it to. It's nice. It's nice. It did frustrate me my first playthrough, but it's nice. I like this a lot. You can go through Ellie's inventory here, which is something I totally missed in my playthrough. You can see her little pun books. You see a note from her mom, Riley's locket, which, by the way, we aren't covering the DLC in this one. That might be interesting to do as a Patreon episode later on. But for now, no DLC. But you can see Riley's locket. Yeah, I thought that was really, really interesting. Did you point this out to me, or did I find this? I can't remember.
I think you did this on your own, but yeah, it's really cool if you take a moment to just kind of thumb through Ellie's backpack. She is equipped with different things than Joel is, obviously. Part of that is because she's just a different person, but also it is winter, as we stated. So she has different items, but it's really cool to look through the stuff that's in her backpack and see these things. So, yeah, I also agree with you. The deer section can be frustrating. You really do need to be stealthy here. Follow the blood trails and definitely just take your time with shooting the arrows. You need, I believe, if I remember correctly, I think it's 3 successful hits, and then we get to this next section here.
Once you do successfully take down this buck, you are tailed by 2 gentlemen. You've got them at bow point, so there's no threat. This is David and his partner, James.
Who's there? Come out!
Hello? We just want to talk.
Any sudden moves and I put one right between your eyes. Ditto for buddy boy over there. What do you want?
Name's David. This here's my friend James. We're from a larger group. Women, children. We're all very, very hungry.
So let's talk a little bit about David. There's not much to say about James. He's just kind of David's sidekick. He does what he's told. We get to see a little bit of him. But let's talk David. David isn't the best character in the game. You know, by default, Ellie and Joel kind of get the majority of the screen time and character development. From that perspective, they're kind of the best characters in the game, right? They have to be. David,
Yeah.
I think, is my favorite. What do you? Let's talk about David. Let me hear your thoughts on David.
All right, so I have to start here, being the resident Uncharted fan. David is played by the great Nolan North, and man, does he kill it in this. I didn't actually know it was him voicing David in this game because he uses a very different voice, very distinct from his own natural voice that he uses for Uncharted. But man, this performance is great. David is full of charisma, and he's very cunning. He chooses his words very carefully, and man, you immediately, as at least the player, Ellie certainly does not, but as the player, it's very easy to feel safe around him. And I love just the portrayal of this character. He's so cool. I'm actually interested to hear what you have to say about him, Rick, because you had mentioned last week that he's your favorite character in the game. So I'd like to know why he's your favorite character.
Well, you sort of touched on it here, right? He chooses his words very carefully. And now some of this is going to be piecing together his character sort of in the same way that you have to as a reader or as somebody playing a game, a narrative experience. He doesn't get the screen time that I wish he had to allow his full character to breathe. So we do have to make some informed decisions about how we think his character is shaped. But one of the first things that you can notice, especially in a retrospective on this, a replay through, just reflecting whatever, is exactly what you said, John. He chooses his words very carefully. One of the first things he says when you see him is he mentions that he's with a group, they're out hunting, for a group of women and children. And he highlights this a few times, women and children. The women and children are back there. We're very hungry. It's the women and children. And he says this over and over. And there are a few other points moving forward where he uses language in a particular way, which we'll comment on. But David is adept and seasoned at psychological manipulation, I think.
Yes, 100%.
Manipulation insofar as others' emotions and perceptions of him, emotions toward him and perceptions of him. He is cunning in that way, and I think that makes for a very good villain, very interesting villain, because otherwise he comes off as very magnanimous, very polite, very cordial. He's not a threat. In no way are either of them threatening Ellie. She's got the bow on them. They are not making any moves, but he turns out to be quite sinister, and it's very exciting to see how this turns out.
David kind of has this, I'm the smartest man in the room mentality, but he also doesn't flaunt it. He will allow you to think and feel whatever you want to, but as we find out later, he kind of just keeps control of the situation in a way that allows you to think that you actually have control in the situation, you being Ellie in this circumstance. So he's just absolutely full of cunning, and I really love the portrayal of this character. Nolan North just kills it.
So he mentions their camp, women and children, everybody's hungry, and he offers to trade. He says that he's got supplies. What does she need? Maybe they could trade and be on their way. And Ellie, this is where Ellie lets her guard down. For as headstrong and capable and tuned into her instinct as Ellie is, she still is ultimately a bit naive. And she blurts out,
Weapons, ammo, clothes.
Medicine. Do you have any antibiotics?
We do. Back at the camp.
and this is something David clues into immediately, and we see this pay off in a little bit later. What ends up happening is David sends his buddy James to go get the medicine. Ellie says that she's not following them, too dangerous. Buddy boy can go, and she's going to keep here with David with her bow fixed on him. So as meek and understanding as David seems, Ellie knows better than to trust anybody. So she forces him to disarm. He drops his weapon, his hunting rifle, and they wait. And, for all the world, he seems like a decent guy, but she refuses to open up to him. But even still, he promptly saves her when a clicker comes through the door. This is a great scene. A clicker comes up and, Ellie is getting ready to shoot it, and it gets shot by David. And she has a moment where she's like, wait, you had another gun on you? And he's just like, yeah, sorry. And this is a key moment too, because it hones in on the fact that David does not put all of his information on display. He keeps his cards held close to his chest. It's part of his, tactics for manipulation and getting what he wants. This is very David.
Yeah, he this whole time is allowing Ellie to feel like she's in control of this situation. And the whole time he has, a metaphorical ace up his sleeve. He's got a couple of cards to play, as you said. I love this fight here. It's actually pretty intense. You're kind of in this room with a lot of windows, and you get infected here. You get runners and clickers coming at you from multiple angles. It really feels like a round of Call of Duty Zombies minus, building the boards to kind of keep your windows and doors safe. It's actually pretty intense. I do love the fight here.
Yeah, it ends with a really fun scene. A really fun set piece of, I don't know what you would call it. That's little upper area of this like shed,
kind of a wood mill or some sort of building like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and all the infected are kind of funneled in. I mentioned that last time. I always like when they do that, when they kind of box you in and funnel everything into you. It's exciting.
This is where, as you mentioned last week, I believe, Rick, where Molotovs come in handy, where you can kind of corner some infected with some Molotovs and just kind of play a game here with them. It's fun.
Once these are taken care of, these infected, they go back to their fire. They created a little fire in shelter. They dragged the buck in there, and they're waiting for James. And they get to talking. This is a terrific scene. David thinks that they make a pretty good team, but Ellie is insistent. It's just luck. We got lucky. No, David says. Everything happens for a reason. And he says he can prove it.
No such thing as luck. Now, you see, I believe that everything happens for a reason.
Sure.
I do. And I can prove it to you. Now, this winter, that's been especially cruel. A few weeks back, I sent a group of men out to a nearby town to look for food. Only a few came back. They said that the others had been slaughtered by a crazy man. And get this, he's a crazy man traveling with a little girl. You see, everything happens for a reason.
Immediately. Well, not immediately. She takes a second to process it. But Ellie pieces it together pretty quickly and grabs a gun. And David, he's pretty quick to not blame her. He says, it's not your fault. You're just a kid. James, lower your gun. At this point, we're like, James, and we see the camera moves over. He came back in at some point, and he's got a gun fixed on Ellie. David talks him down, and he orders him to give her the medicine. And James does not want to. at first. What about all of our men? But David seems sort of worn down a little bit, defeated. He's tired. And I wonder how much of this he is putting on as an act, too. And before Ellie runs off, he offers to help her. He says, you won't survive long out there. I can protect you. Of course, Ellie declines and runs off back to the horse and rides out. And that's the last we're going to see of him for a little bit.
Yeah, this whole fire scene is really cool. I love that the whole time David isn't directly looking at her. He's kind of stoking the fire with this stick. And then when he mentions and get this crazy man was traveling with a little girl, he stops stoking the fire and he points the stick right at Ellie. It's very much this kind of intense, like, hey, guess what? I know the person that you're trying to protect and cure with this medicine, and it's a nonchalant way of saying I might try to get my revenge against you guys. Or I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. When he points that stick at her, I don't know, there's something about the way that it's acted that just is like, now you're in the crosshairs, or I can help you. You pick.
It's a really great scene. I encourage folks that haven't played it to look it up. The audio is going to be in here, but there's something to be added whenever you get to see the mocap and the facial the facial expressions and the body language too. So Ellie rides off, and again, just a bit naive, rides directly back to their hideout, where an injured, delirious, and barely conscious Joel is lying. For all of Ellie's informed gut tuition and survivability smarts, her common sense is just a little bit lacking. And of course, this leads the men right back to her hideaway the next morning. They don't know which building around here Ellie is in, but they tracked her here. They know she's here. So she decides to draw them away. She's going to divert them away from Joel and then come back later. They catch her as she rides off, and they try to shoot her down. You're riding through and fighting them off of your horse. They're shooting at you and they're shooting at the horse. And as you're riding away, one of the men, you can hear them say, they order to shoot her, and one of the men will say, but David said, and another man says, fuck David, shoot her now. And you wonder for a sec, did David order not to have her killed? And why? It's very interesting. We don't know what's happening here. Despite Ellie's best efforts, they do shoot her horse.
R.I.P. Callus, and I agree with Joel. It is a dumb name for a horse, but R.I.P. Callus.
You're on foot for now. There are another set of encounters in a row of cabins and houses. There are a lot of men here, and you really don't have nearly the amount of supplies you did as Joel, so you've got to be parsimonious with your ammo and shots here. By the way, I said something here I want to circle back to. There are a lot of men here. We have yet to see any of those women and children David was so keen to tell us about. Just keep that hidden away for yourself. As you're making your way back around to Joel and fighting off David's men, you get apprehended from behind by David. He puts you in a sleeper hold, and as you're fading out, he says, I'm keeping you alive here. So, as the player on first brush, we don't know what's going on. At first, honestly, when I was first going through this, before I kind of pieced everything together, I was wondering, are David's men sort of mutinying and like kicking him out of control, saying he's too soft, something like that? I honestly wondered that at first.
Yeah, I think David's men want retribution for the events that happened at the university. Joel and Ellie kill a lot of guys in that whole set piece. And, David says, in the earlier fire scene we were just mentioning that, not even half his guys came back. So I think these guys are just wanting to kind of serve justice to Joel and Ellie. And tracking Ellie gives them the chance to find Joel and bring him to justice. I think it's more that rather than trying to have a mutiny. At least that's my take anyway.
Oh, no, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. I'm just, on the first go-around, that's one of the places my mind went to. And even so, I mean, that could still be a mutiny. The leader, David, says, we're not getting retribution, and the men all say, fuck that. We're in charge now. We outnumber you. We want blood. Blood was spilled, and blood must be repaid. Something like that.
100%.
But
Yeah.
something you said, John, Ellie and Joel killed a lot of men. We're going to talk about that in like 2 seconds here, because this is going to be an important argument for the rest of the game. When we wake up, Ellie does, she's watching somebody butcher a human, cutting their hands off, kind of like one would do a pig or a cow. We're in a cell. It's unclear why or where we are. David walks in. He says, "How are you feeling?" He gives her a big plate of food. Ellie is extremely uncooperative throughout here, as she should be. It's mystery food, but he assures her it's deer. Ellie doesn't buy it. She asks if it's human. He says, "No, it's just deer." He promises it's not people. Ellie doesn't have any grounds on which she can barter, so she eats the food pretty ravenously. It's clear that she was very famished. After she's done, she kind of kicks or pushes the dish forcefully back and says, "You're fucking animals." And David says,
It's awfully quick to judgment. Considering you and your friend killed how many men?
They didn't give us a choice.
And you think we have a choice? Is that it? You kill to survive. And so do we. We have to take care of our own, by any means necessary.
So now what? You gonna chop me up into tiny pieces?
I'd rather not.
and it's here that David raises a really good point. Let's go back to what you said, John. Ellie and Joel killed a lot of men. Where is the line between David and Ellie and Joel? The ethical and moral line, where is it? We are predisposed as the player to believe that we are controlling the hero, that the protagonist, quote unquote, is equal to the good guy, quote unquote. But is this really so? If one only kills to survive, what makes anybody else's situation fundamentally different from ours? What has David and his men done that makes them any different from a moral and ethical standpoint to Joel and Ellie? They're just surviving.
It's maybe the only counterpoint here is that I would maybe raise is that David and his community are cannibals. So yes, they are killing to survive, but then they also add cannibalism on top of the list of atrocities, where Joel and Ellie are killing for survival, but not doing anything with the bodies or anything after that. So maybe that's the only line that I see that's a difference, is the cannibalism. But yeah, it's a fantastic point.
Well, we don't know that yet, but let's assume that we do. If we're taking a utilitarian approach here, what makes cannibalism in this setting ethically wrong? They're doing it solely to survive, to be able to feed themselves and their families. If these people are dead already, what good is throwing away food into the ground that could be used to keep the living surviving another day? This is the sort of ethical quandary that we run into in post-societal situations like this.
It's a fantastic question. I don't know if I have an answer for is it morally or ethically wrong. I was bringing it up as some people would look at that and go, okay, well, that's a line too far. I'm not necessarily saying that is my line, but I think some people would say I'm not going to go that far. I will kill what I need to survive, but eating another human, that's where some people would draw a line.
No, of course. And I'm not challenging you specifically, but, you are here and have the pleasure, some might call it the displeasure, of having a conversation with me. So you're kind of my bouncing off points for this stuff. I'm just being silly. But This is the kind of thing that we get into whenever we do thought experiments and whenever we talk about these ethical questions, is we have to come up against fringe cases like this that cause us to question why we feel that eating a human is fundamentally more ethically impure than eating animals. Because to be clear, we all feel this way. Anybody that was raised in a Western society is going to say, yes, eating a human is wrong in almost every case. But whenever we get to these fringe cases like this, or, oh gosh, what was that one? thing where that group of soccer players, football players, crashed in the Andes and they had to eat the deceased teammates to survive, and they eventually did.
Oh, yeah.
And do you know what I'm talking
Chile,
about?
Yeah, was that Chile, I believe?
Yeah.
Not too far from where I am.
That's one of these ethical fringe cases where you have to morally and ethically confront yourself with difficult conversations. And now we have the luxury of being divorced from all of this, and we can sit in our gamer chairs and talk about whether or not this is okay. And, you know, if we were ever in this situation, we would be all maybe singing a different tune,
Sure.
regardless of which side of the fence we're on. But it is very interesting. David is prompting the player to, you know, think ethically for a second. What is the difference between them? You know, really, how many people have Joel and Ellie killed? Like, we've killed a lot of people, you know? And this motif of Joel only doing what it takes to survive is going to be in the spotlight full brights for the rest of the game in a very exciting way.
Yeah, it's a really cool discussion to have. And I think the point that David is making, at least, you know, to the player is one that certainly is deserving of a conversation. And so I'm glad we got to kind of just parse this out a little bit. This was fun.
Yeah, the ethics of cannibalism has been parsed out. It's done. It's completed. I invite all future philosophers and ethicists to come on and just listen to this, and problem solved.
Yeah.
All right, enough facetiousness. We've got serious business to do. Podcasting, that's serious business. You can tell David is getting quietly frustrated. He has been completely honest with Ellie, he says, and she won't give him the same courtesy. He doesn't even know her name. He says that this is the only way he can convince the others that she can come around, that she can rehabilitate, that, quote, she's special, he says, as he lays a hand over hers on the bars. For a moment, it's difficult to read Ellie's face. I mean, partly because this is a video game, but, you know, also that it's an ambiguous facial expression. We think for a second, maybe she is coming around to David's hospitality before she promptly breaks his finger. He says,
You are making it very difficult to keep you alive. What am I supposed to tell the others now?
And there's a beat, and she says, Ellie.
Ellie,
What?
tell them that Ellie is the little girl that broke your fucking finger.
There's another beat, and David says,
How did you put it? Tiny pieces. See you in the morning, Ellie.
just to put a little note on that, I think I didn't mention that line. Ellie accused him of cutting people up into tiny little pieces. So that's what he's doing a little callback to.
This is such a cool scene in that Ellie kind of taps into some of the same areas that David does, where we just mentioned a few minutes ago that David likes to keep everything kind of very close to the vest. He doesn't play all of his cards at once, and this was one of Ellie's last cards, was not being able to give out her name until she wanted to. And I love the way that she does it here. As we'll see in just a moment, there is one last card she has to play here, and it's a really, really cool.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I wanted to just take one more brief pit stop. I'm sorry. I know this is going to be a longer episode. I want to make a pit stop here. There's a through line of David being a pedophile in this game. But because he does not have the screen time that I think his character deserves from a character standpoint to breathe and develop, it's not expressed in a super meaningful way in the game outside of two instances. One of those is here, which seems effusive and opaque at best. And there is a later very cinematic scene involving Ellie in which she alludes to it. Now, my understanding actually from talking with you about this previously, John, is that the show is much clearer on this. Personally, I think leaving it vague and obfuscated in this way works better. It only gives the player enough evidence to suspect but never confirm, so we always get to sort of think, is this right? And then have conversations with others. And, to the above point too, there is a read to be made that up to this point, perhaps prior to her being in the cell, and, you know, killing scores of David's men, that David's intentions weren't always nefarious. You know, I don't know. Well, let me read what I wrote here. I don't know that I believe in a resolute way that David from the giddy-up had eyes to torment her, or at the very least to kill her. He clearly recognized her from descriptions during their first encounter, but it could be argued that with some healthy grooming, he could have turned her into an asset for him and his group. A sort of unhinged protection device. Now, there is a line from another one of David's men later that directly opposes my take here, and kind of refutes me. But I do wonder at what point did David's intentions tip, because at this point it's pretty clear, like Ellie is not going to survive. You know, if they meet again, Ellie's in trouble. But I don't know that it was always that way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the answer to your question as far as where did the scales tip for David, I think it's in this moment, the last moment here of the cell. You know, when she just flat right out breaks his finger, I think that's when he goes, okay, you know what, fuck you. Like, I tried, I've been honest with you, and, you know, if I wanted to, I could have ended your life at least 5 or 6 different times, you know, up to this point. And I think that you could be an asset to our community, but you know what? I tried. You're not moving an inch, and you know what? I'm done. So I think that's where the scales tipped on the side of David going, you know what? Okay, I'm done. I'm just done.
So I want to sidestep back to the aspect of him being a sexual predator. Do you feel that the show handles this better?
Oh, yeah. Going back to this, the show really lays it out. And there's a couple of scenes in particular where it's expanded upon greatly. I know in the previous conversation you and I had in Discord, I believe, Neil Druckmann had come out and said that, you know, David is a pedophile in a couple of interviews. So it was confirmed there. But the show really kind of makes it obvious, I would say. Here, I think, as you pointed out, Rick, that there are at least maybe a couple little snippets where people could put it together. It's left ambiguous, but most people that I've talked to that have played this game, when they see these things in the game, maybe not quickly, but they jump to the same conclusion that, oh, David is a pedophile. I don't know if there was anyone that I've talked to that felt differently, but long answer to your question, yeah, the show handles it in a way that makes it pretty obvious.
I would challenge that the game lays it out such that it's obvious. I really would. And I'm saying that because I like how the game does it. I like that it's not explicitly told. I don't know. I don't know. You had mentioned when I first played through this, and I mentioned this in the Discord, you had said something similar that, like, oh yeah, you know, the people that I've talked to, everybody knew. I was like, I don't know that that's true. You know, I don't know that the game is that obvious about it. And I like that it's not. I don't know. It is confirmed though. Like, there is no two ways about it. He is. I think it's just a little more interesting to have discussion points where it can be maybe but, as opposed to evidence, comma, so, or evidence, comma, therefore.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's how they've handled a lot of the secondary and tertiary characters of the story. We don't know everything that happened with Bill and Frank or Henry and Sam. So they're kind of doing the same thing within each season of the game so far, where we get some information about all of these characters, but not the full story. But we also don't need the full story, as you pointed out in last week's episode, I believe. So the fact that so much of it is left up to interpretation and just what you want to think on your own as the player, I really dig. There's enough there for you to dig into if you want, but there's also stuff where you can sit with it and think about it and come to your own conclusions, which I dig.
Yeah, totally. Same here. So let's move on. I think there's a lot more interesting discussion to be had through the rest of the game, and you know, we can't just talk for 8 hours. So let's keep going. We're back as Joel. Joel's just woken up. This is the most video gamey this game gets in this scene, by the way. It's kind of funny. It looks like the medicine that Ellie gave him worked, at least a little. He's very clearly still way too injured to be moving around. But that's exactly what we're going to do for the final few hours. We stand up, we can start crafting. We've got our guns. We just walk on out of there. It's so video gamey, you know? It's funny.
Yeah, Joel summons all of his dad / caretaker strength here, and it is rather comical in a way.
Yeah. You know, as committed to this game has been to verisimilitude and keeping things real, you know, it's still a video game. So I don't think this is a con. This actually, I think it's funny. It's good. It's time to find Ellie. And of course, this means we're taking out many of David's men on the way, which as the player, we should now be primed into thinking, is Joel acting out of survival? And we're confronted with that very, very clearly in a very important scene. How many more times can I use very? Coming up here. Joel manages to take 2 of David's men into a shed and torture them.
Now, the girl. Is she alive?
What girl? I don't know no girl. Fuck!
Focus right here, right here. I'll pop your goddamn knee off. The girl.
He's looking for Ellie. He manages to get the information out of the 2. One of them is tied to a chair, and he forces him to mark with his mouth because he's like tied up, so he puts a marker in there. Marks on the map where Ellie's at with David. And he says, you know, if your buddy who is back there and didn't see you mark this, if he picks out a different spot, I'll kill you both. Joel promptly snaps that guy's neck anyway. The other guy in the back says,
Fuck you, man. He told you what you wanted. I ain't telling you shit.
And Joel says,
That's all right. I believe him.
No, wait.
and then he murders him too in cold blood. You know, this is, you know, there's that scene in Breaking Bad where Walt, it can be argued that the switch flips from Walt to Heisenberg and he's never the same. This is that moment. This is that moment for Joel. His descent into selfishness is complete. He's no longer killing to survive. That arrow in his quiver is gone. He kills now for control. He kills to get what he wants.
And what he wants is his surrogate daughter.
Yes.
It's such a brutal scene, but I gotta admit, every time that I've played through the game and this scene comes up, it's one that I don't skip. It's one that, like, at least for me as the player on the stick, I'm like, fuck yeah, let's go, Joel. Like, you're finally, it's kind of like Neo in the Matrix finally believing like he's the one, right? This is Joel finally going, okay, I have feelings for this child that I've been traveling with for almost a year now. She is my surrogate daughter, and I'm going to do everything in my parental power to go find her, get her, and make sure she's safe. And anything that stands in my way, you better watch the fuck out.
Two quick things. First of all, would you believe me if I told you that not only have I never seen a full Matrix anything, but I've actually seen more of the Animatrix than I have of the actual movie, The Matrix.
Oh my gosh, that is a blind spot in your backlog, my friend. You only need to watch the first Matrix. All the other ones suck ass. The first Matrix is really good.
That's what I've heard. I really do. I have traditionally been very, very poor at watching movies. But I'll get there for sure. But the second thing is, you know, what I love about this is Joel's morality has been tainted beyond repair at this point, but there's still that veneer of him looking for his daughter and having some semblance of doing the right thing that we as the players can cheer for him, even as he's doing this horrible, horrible thing. And even as we know, like, he's irredeemable at this point, there's still a part of us that wants to go, fuck yeah, man. Like, good for you. You know what I mean? It's great.
Yeah. I'm fully on board with that, because that's certainly how I feel in that moment. Yeah.
So we're back with Ellie. She's getting pinned to a table by David and James. You know, they're going to kill her. Before David, he pulls out his machete. That's kind of his signature weapon. He's going to chop her up, and they're going to eat her. Before he does, she yells that she's infected. And so are you, she says. This gets them to stop for a second. They roll up her sleeve, and they're completely taken aback. They don't know what to do. David says, that can't be real, and James says, well, it sure looks real as fuck to me. And luckily, Ellie is, for all of her naivety, she's incredibly good at thinking on her feet. She seizes this moment of hesitation in them, grabs David's knife, plants it squarely into James's jugular. He's dead. Yeah, he's dead on the spot, and she barely manages to escape out of the window as David is shooting at her. So this is a very tense gameplay sequence where you are at a total disadvantage. You have nothing except your little shiv knife, and you've got to stealth around and take out David's men. And as you're doing so, you can hear David and his men telling everybody outside about what happened. We've mentioned this before. The Last of Us 2, I think, does this a little better, but it's really nice to have NPCs that don't feel like just walking experience points. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this whole scene is really cool. This is calling back to what I was saying about Ellie playing her last card. This was it. She knows that she's not infected and that she's immune, but she knows that if she plays this card of saying, hey, I'm infected, take a look at my arm, it's going to make at least one of the two of David and James pause, and it gives her enough time to say, hey, I'm going to kill this guy and I'm going to go. And she's able to pick up her switchblade on the way out. This whole sequence is really cool. It being winter and snowy really lends itself so well here. Your screen will fog up and get kind of blurry. You can't really see that much unless you find some sort of light source in the distance, a fire barrel or some sort of light outside. It's so well done. It's really cool. There's a couple different buildings you can duck into to try and hide and stuff. It's really fun, but really intense as well.
I totally agree. This section and the following section with Joel, this is part of why I love this season of the game so much. This brings up a question. Can Ellie bite people and infect them?
That would be a cool defense. If she can.
Because she said, she's bluffing here, presumably, but, if she's got the cordyceps in her, is her saliva infectious? That'd be pretty neat. That'd be a cool fanfic to see somebody create.
Oh, yeah, totally. That would be kind of interesting. Ellie, the cordyceps vampire.
Yeah, there you go. Halloween. We just missed it. So it's very tense. She's at a super disadvantage. This is David's town. She's not familiar with it. Everybody's looking for her. She has nothing. It's terrific. This ends in a sort of a cabin / mess hall, where campers would come to get some food before doing activities for the day. Ellie is ambushed here by David as she tries to escape. He's in there with her, and the hunt begins. The cabin also, they knock over a lamp here, I would assume, and a small fire starts. But this is sort of
an oil lamp of sorts, yeah.
Yeah, this is this season's sort of boss. You are in there, and he's hunting you, and you've got to figure out a way to take him down. He's seen through your ruse at this point. He's got a great line. He says, no one that's infected fights this hard to stay alive. Awesome.
I love it, yeah.
What you have to do here is you have to sneak around, because remember, he's got a gun. You have to sneak around and catch him off guard with a bottle, which you can then, hit him and then shiv him. And you have to do that 3 times. And after that, he pulls out his machete and begins hunting with that too. And then eventually he also begins to start sneaking, which makes your strategy of listening with your X-ray vision completely ineffective. You can't see him if he's sneaking. And I love that. That is such a good little gameplay consideration that they did. Oh, it's so good. I love this whole section.
Yeah, this whole big restaurant lodge thing is really cool. There's also a bunch of broken plates and glass and cups on the ground, and if you step on them, he gets alerted to where you are, and he'll come running with the machete or fire in that direction. So you got to really be watching out where he is and where you're also maneuvering to, because it's a big restaurant kind of thing, set piece anyway, and yeah, it's really intense. You can go into the kitchen or where all the seating area is. It's really, really cool. I love this whole set piece.
Yeah. The last melee encounter here ends with you stabbing him in the shoulder, and it kind of results in both you and him falling, like too winded and kind of depleted of stamina to continue. And then it cuts to Joel again, and he is heading further into the White Storm to find Ellie. I love this here. The whole time a bell is tolling here. And this, to me, this is a symbol. I've talked on this show before about what a bell can signify, right? Or maybe I talked about it on another show. I don't remember. But it can be signifying of the beginning, like a wedding, for example, a unification, a celebration of new life, or it can represent the opposite. It can represent a funeral. It can represent the end of something, a closing of a chapter. And here it represents both. It signifies the potential end of Ellie, but also a new reality for Joel, this new chapter in Joel's life where it's not just about survival anymore. It's about using his power to get what he wants. And while what he wants is, it can't be argued just, he is no longer just killing in self-defense. This is about revenge and Joel's dishing out of his own personal justice. It's beautiful. I'm sure there's at least somebody out there that's saying, you're reading too far into that. And like, yeah, maybe. But here's the thing. It's not about whether that's what the author intended. It's about whether we can argue it and it sparks interesting conversation. That's what makes stuff like this fun. I don't know why. I hate that I do that. I hate that I argue with people that are made up. That is a consequence of being online in this modern age. And I hate that so many of us feel that we have to do it. I wish that we didn't.
No, I think you're onto something really cool there. I love that what is basically just the alarm for David's town does kind of sound like these church bell kind of things. And I think you're onto something there with, potentially being funeral bells or like a marriage or new beginning, something like that. So yeah, I can get on board with this. I think it's a really cool point.
So as he moves through, Joel sort of sees the grim reality in two back-to-back scenes. First, as we go into this, it's like adjacent to the lodge, we see hanging corpses kept chilled for food. So this confirms, like, they are cannibals. If you didn't pick it up when they were butchering a human and David's little snide comments, this is it. Like, cannibal, confirmed. But also, he sees the lodge on fire. Right, that little oil lamp that you brought up, Joel, that you brought up, John. It's on fire now. Everything's on fire. We cut back to Ellie and David. This is shot in a very cool way. They're both waking up. The camera is sort of positioned behind and to the left of Ellie's back and side, and we're crawling towards the machete, laboriously we're crawling, only to be stopped by David, kicked repeatedly in the sides as we're crawling toward the blade. He's being vicious here. And he says, you can give up. There ain't no shame in it. And here he pins her down. He flips her over, pins her down, and begins to choke her. And she gets the upper hand. She manages to get his machete and just begins hacking him. This is a really moving scene. She flips over onto him, and the camera is just focused on her face as she emotionlessly, methodically, rhythmically, with the hesitation of an assembly line, that is to say none, hacks him to bits and pieces. And it's only when Joel comes up behind her, pulls her off, snaps her out of it, that she comes to, and the emotion comes in. Now she's freaking out. Everything is hitting her. She begins breaking down. She begins crying. This is the second piece of information that folks will cite about David being a sexual predator. Because while Ellie is being consoled by Joel, which, I see that you have some notes here, so I'll let you talk more on that. While he's consoling her, as she's breaking down, she says he tried to, and then gets choked off. We don't have enough information, I feel, to infer what she means, but the popular consensus is that she's implying that he tried to rape her. Which again, there wasn't enough screen time because this is a video game with concessions by the developers, the publishers, editors need to say, cut this, cut this, cut this. We didn't have the breadth, but I would argue again, the ambiguity plays to the story's strength. We don't need to be told explicitly this is what happened. We can infer it from her. Now, whether or not you believe that's what happened, that's up to you. I mean, Neil Druckmann did kind of come in and say, no, actually, it is true. So some of that mystery is gone. But, it makes sense because Ellie has seen so much death and destruction. She has murdered men with her own hand. Why would she be choked up and too afraid to say he tried to kill me? Doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah, this scene, at least in the show, they make it more obvious of what was happening here. Not just, Ellie going to town on David with a machete, but kind of the second sexual assault, as you put it. I love that the camera shot of this in the game is just Ellie holding the machete over top of David's face, but you don't actually see David. What you see is just a metric shit ton of blood flying everywhere, and music kicks in here, and she's crying, she's distraught, she is just like all energy being sapped out of her in this moment, and man, is it brutal. And Joel comes in, not necessarily saves the day, but comes in and comforts her, and this is where the use of the word baby girl shows up again. Remember in the opening prologue of this game with Sarah, when she dies, he uses the word baby girl. And he uses it also when he puts Sarah to sleep. But he comforts Ellie here, gives her a big hug and says, hey, it's okay. It's me, baby girl. And man, first time he uses it with Ellie, and man, is it powerful. It's, if killing the guys before in the scene wasn't just enough of like the dad energy, this is the culmination, the completion of Joel the dad arc here of like, you are now officially my surrogate daughter. And this embrace just speaks volumes to me. It's so well done, and it's perfectly acted out, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. This signifies the completion of the transformation. Ellie is now his daughter, functionally, for real. We're not joking. They are now father and daughter. And we can see Joel's demeanor change in this upcoming season. We transition now to spring, and Joel, I mean, he seems warmer to Ellie. He seems, there's a connection there. There's a familiarity that was absent before. It's like a care that's under the hood that, it's like when you're missing a bass in certain music, you can't put your finger on it when it's there, but when it's taken away, it's like, oh, now something's gone. This is the opposite of that. Now that it's back, we might not have noticed it before, but now that it's there, that warmness, that caring, that sense of paternal guardianship, now it's clear as day. There has been a switch flip. That's a great catch. I forgot to write that down. Thank you for keeping me honest there.
Oh yeah.
Joel here is like that, but Ellie is now, functionally, it's like she's suffering from PTSD. She's not mentally present. She's very much in her own bubble. She's tuning things out. There's a really nice grace note of the gameplay that highlights this too. As you're going through talking, Joel will have to be like, Ellie, you listening to me? Ellie, everything okay? Ellie, what's going on? But as you're going through gameplay stuff, there's your typical button prompt you get to have Ellie climb up onto a ledge using Joel as like a little step ladder. And it always enacts the same way in the game. You press the button, Joel assumes the position, and Ellie like steps up on his knee and gets hoisted up. And it does that here, but instead of Ellie coming in, there's nothing, and the camera turns around, and she's just sitting off in the distance. And Joel has to kind of coax her over. That's great. That's great. A lesser game wouldn't have even done that. That's a really good touch.
Yeah, I really love that in this beginning section of spring here, Joel and Ellie have essentially switched personalities. Joel is more outgoing and more kind of extroverted here. They have conversation about Joel promises to teach her guitar, which may or may not show up in part 2. We'll get there eventually. And Ellie is certainly more quiet and reserved. As you said, she's really just reserved, and she gets distracted by like some graffiti and things out on this highway that you're walking on. And I love this button prompt sequence here, where something that you've seemingly done maybe not 100 times, but probably a few dozen times throughout the game, right? And she's not there. She's just sitting on the bench of this, what basically used to be like a Greyhound bus depot kind of thing. And she's just like, oh, wait, what? Huh? What? Oh, okay. And, then the prompt goes through, and she climbs to the top of the ladder, and it falls, and she gets distracted by something. And I love this next scene here that we'll talk about.
Yeah, it's beautiful. She gets distracted. She's like, oh my God. And then, Joel has to get the ladder and climb up. And as we're walking after her, this is the first time in so long that we see Ellie the child reemerge, right? She's feeling the wonder of youth that we almost never see in this landscape anymore. And it's because there are giraffes outside. Real, actual giraffes. What do you call a group of giraffes? A herd? A business? A posse? I don't know. But there are a group of giraffes outside walking along, grazing right into the building onto the foliage, close enough to touch. Despite it all, nature persists throughout this. I know I have more written here, but I want to give it to you, John, to hear your take on this.
So, just real quick, Google says that a group of giraffes is called a tower. I think that's very aptly named.
Yeah, that's on the nose. Sure, a tower.
Man, I love this. It's a great callback to Ellie's childlike demeanor that we saw kind of more in the beginning sections when she is first out in nature, or even back when she is still the first time outside of the QZ in Boston, and she's experiencing rain or being outside the walls, or eventually in the early parts of Billstown where she sees a rabbit and actual fireflies and things. And she's never been to a zoo or seen really any other animals at this point, and to see something as gigantic and magnificent as a giraffe, but not just one singular one, but a whole herd of them, or a tower of them, is really cool. I love this whole thing. I remember the first time playing this and not knowing what it was we were going to see, because Ellie climbs up this ladder, she knocks it down, Joel's now got to go chase after her. We have no idea until it's actually shown. We see shadows moving in the distance, and you as the player, and then Joel too is like, what the fuck is going on? Like, we don't know if it's something dangerous or what's going on. But I love how it ends with this whole giraffe sequence. It's really, really cool. It's a great set piece.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a visual metaphor too. I mean, the ever-presence of the natural world will remain no matter what happens societally. Earth, Terra, biology that continues to exist. This is not, society may collapse, but all hope is not lost. And even too, this is also a metaphor to the journey that we've been on, right? It's explicitly called out. It bookends it to when Ellie and Joel and Tess first get out of the QZ. And, like you said, they say the same exact thing. And it's representative of, at that point in the journey, that was their first glimpse of hope. Getting out of the QZ, they're filled with hope. We could do something good. And even after everything we just experienced, we're getting that again. All hope is not lost. There's still good in the world. There's still a chance to make things right. It's beautiful. And perhaps moved by Ellie's childlike nature in this moment, this is the first time Joel's resolve wavers. His parental instinct kicks in. And he tells Ellie, we don't have to do this. We can go back, we can live at Tommy's camp, we can have a good life, make the best of it. But Ellie has grown up so much in a short time span. They've been through literal hell on earth, and she says that it can't be for nothing. There's no half measures here. As they're walking too, she opens up a little bit. They both do. Joel actually finally acknowledges Sarah with Ellie. You know, Ellie gives him the photo, and it's a really sweet moment. If I can find the game audio and it's clear enough without background noise, I'll put it in here. But it's their relationship has fully evolved for the moment.
It's a very sweet moment because you, as the player and as Joel, had no idea that Ellie even recovered this photo. Last we saw it, it was with Tommy at the dam. So at some point, maybe in the whole skirmish at the dam, or maybe Maria gave it to her, somehow Ellie got her hands on this picture. And I love this whole scene here. Joel finally breaks down this wall, this facade of Sarah, and it's such a sweet moment. I love this.
Yeah, I agree completely. We still have a ways to go. We're going to traverse through a subway that has been overtaken by water. Walking over some conveniently placed cargo trucks and buses, one begins to shift in the underwater dirt, and the two of us fall. You know, Joel is able to save Ellie from the water, but once on land, she's not breathing. He begins to start, administering CPR. He's panicking, but his attempts are interrupted by two men in uniform, like full-on uniform with guns, of course. They're shouting at him to put his hands in the air, and he's not listening. He's just trying to get Ellie to breathe again. So they knock him out using the butt of their guns. Boom. And when he wakes up, he's on a bed beside Marlene.
Welcome to the Fireflies. Sorry about that. They didn't know who you were.
And Ellie?
She's all right. They brought her back. You came all this way. How'd you do it?
She is completely nonplussed that he's here. All this way, he's made it here by himself. It's almost as if this was fate. They found her just in time to save her, she says. Joel will then ask to see her, and she says, no, we can't do that. She's being prepped for surgery. And this is where the cards all fall on the table. The reason she's immune is due to the cordyceps virus mutating in her brain, and the only way to get a vaccine is to remove the cordyceps and use them to create it. Because the virus grows on the brain, this will kill Ellie. So were you, I think a lot of folks probably were expecting this. I wasn't. Were you?
Expecting that Ellie had to die.
Yeah, it seems obvious in retrospect, but I mean, I didn't think it was coming.
The part that surprised me the most, I think, in this section was the resurfacing of Marlene. I really was under the impression on my first playthrough that after Boston, we would not see her again. That was probably the more surprising part, I think, for me. I think the whole Ellie's immunity and what that means and everything that it entails, the cordyceps mutation and that they would need to remove it and it would kill her. I don't think it was as a surprise for me. It kind of was like, well, okay, if you're saying that that's going to happen, then I knew, or at least I was kind of thinking in the moment, probably along the lines of Joel, like, well, okay, you can try, but I'm going to be a one-man army here and I'm saving my daughter. So good luck.
Yeah, Joel will immediately say, find someone else. We're not doing this. And he's promptly beaten down by a guard. Marlene shuts him down entirely. She's known Ellie for all of her life. She's thought this through. There's no other way. She's presenting herself here as completely steadfast and stone-faced. She has had nothing but time to think about this.
But it grows all over the brain.
It does.
Find someone else.
There is no one else.
Listen, you were gonna show me where...
Stop. I get it. But whatever it is you think you're going through right now is nothing to what I have been through. I knew her since she was born. I promised her mother I would look after her.
Then why are you letting this happen?
Because this isn't about me, or even her. There is no other choice here.
There's no other way. To save humanity, we have to kill Ellie. This is, I mean, we're coming back to the most focused and obvious display of the trolley problem, right?
Yeah.
What I've described as Ethics 101, which I don't mean pejoratively, I just mean that it's a question that pervades the whole field. Is the good of the many worth the sacrifice of the few, or in this case, the one? Now, there's no right answer here, obviously. If you're a utilitarian, if you're a humanitarian, different schools of thought have different, ideas as to what the right answer here is. But to Joel, who, if we're being a little bit glib and, honest here, Joel doesn't have time to think philosophically. All he knows is that his daughter is going to die again. His second chance at being a father is about to be taken away, and God damn it if he is not going to try and protect her.
100%. Yeah, it's an interesting callback almost, as you put it here, the Ethics 101. If we flash back to the beginning stages of the Pittsburgh level, where Ellie's questioning, oh my gosh, why did the military bomb all these places and sacrifice all these people? And Joel's response was, well, you sacrificed the few to save the many. And now Joel's in the position of, well, we need to sacrifice his few, his one, to save the many. And he's not wanting to budge on that. It's a cool exposition here that I love. It's really, really well done.
Absolutely. This through line runs through the entire game. That's what a through line is. Yeah. And it's the game was preparing us to think about this moment. It was priming us from the very beginning to think in terms of what does it mean what does, quote, the greater good mean to you? What would you go to save and preserve the greater good? We've seen this on a local level all throughout the game and a global level as well, and it is now the only thing that we are able to think about. This is what the game wants us to confront, and just as Joel must, so too must we. Marlene orders him out. She minces no words. She says if he tries to do anything funny, kill him. Shoot him. Their alliance, their friendship, it doesn't mean anything anymore. She's going to save the world whether Joel likes it or not. As he's being marched out, Joel is, this is where he reaches the climax of his story. It's now or never. He somehow manages to stop, spin around, and commandeer the guard's gun. It's action movie. It's great. He pushes the gun. This is so funny to me. He pushes the operator against the wall, the guard, puts the gun right into his manhood, demands to know where the operating floor is, and just plants a few bullets squarely, can we be blue here, into the guy's prick before he's able to answer. And he says, top floor. And Joel executes him as soon as he gets the information. He didn't have to kill him. Boom, he's done. Tess died for what she believed in. So too will Joel if he needs to. But in this moment, we see that those two could not have been any more different.
This is, as brutal as Joel kind of killing the two guys in David's town in cold blood, how brutal that was. This is, getting shot in the dick twice and then to then just be offed. Oh man, brutal. But man, your note here too, probably one of the more brutal combat sequences here. There's a lot of dudes here and they're armed to the teeth. It's the Fireflies. They're basically a secondary military faction. And man, this trek to find Ellie is brutal and intense and also fun.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but we get more powerful guns here, don't we? Or at least one more powerful gun because the Fireflies have it?
Yes, this is the one and only time in the game you get an assault rifle, and it's pretty badass.
Oh yeah, and all pretty much all of the guards will have these. So there's no reason to hoard your ammo anymore. This is the last stand. Use it or lose it. They're hunting you. You're gonna have to use it. This is tough. I died a couple times in this, and then with the ending sequence, which we'll talk about in a sec. We find more of those voice memos throughout here. Some of them are very scientific, talking about the cordyceps, but we find a couple from Marlene, which is very funny to me. Why would Marlene be recording these? remember, Ellie was with Marlene and the Fireflies as a little kid after her mom gave her up. We find recordings of the surgeons, but we also find them from Marlene, as I said. She knew from the jump, from the very beginning, that killing Ellie was the only way to create a vaccine. This is why she was able to be so stone-faced with Joel. She's had nothing but time to think about this. There's also one at the very end, an audio file that is from Marlene, that talks about how they just found Joel and Ellie, and did she just record this a few minutes before? What is this? This is so weird. Do you remember what I'm talking about, John?
Yeah, it's in
what's the deal with this?
Yeah, it's in one of the last rooms that you find on a table. There's a gurney and stuff in there. Yeah, it's interesting. It seems like it was probably recorded in the time that Joel was knocked out.
Yeah.
And presumably she's already talked with the doctor that's going to perform this surgery or whatever, and she's kind of come to terms with, okay, Ellie's going to be sacrificed. But she also has a couple of lines within this particular memo where she's like, okay, if anyone's going to understand what I'm going through as kind of a surrogate parent to Ellie, because she kind of fulfilled that role for a number of years. She mentions that Joel would know what it is. He's traveled across the country, and she has a moment where she's like, he needs to know what's going to happen, and I got to tell him. And she wrestles with that. And I love that moment within the voice memo. It speaks to Marlene's character a little bit, but it's certainly not an easy discussion to have with Joel.
That's very true. As much as I was lightly clowning on it a second ago, why is this here? It does let us know that Marlene, she's not, how to phrase this, she's not as cold and calculating as she appeared to Joel. If anything, that's more of a visage and a mask that she puts on to protect, herself from her own feelings. It's not like she wants this, and she doesn't want to destroy Joel's entire world. It's kind of unfortunate that conversation had to happen the way that it did, right? She probably wanted to tell him a little more gingerly, but Joel opened those gates, and she decided, well, we've got to go through them now. It's now or never. It sucks, but, that's just the way the cards, the dice fall sometimes. Joel storms the operating room. This is crazy. The doctors will stand to him in vain. They hold their scalpels out. I laugh, but it's a very dramatic and emotional scene because they're holding their scalpels out. They have a chance to save the world. Remember back when Joel pushed Tommy into the locker and said, "I bring you the cure to save humanity, and you want to play the pissy little brother." The roles are reversed now. They're standing to Joel saying, we have the cure to save humanity, and you want to play the dramatic hero? They don't say that, but they may as well. That's what their scalpels are representing. They're holding them to Joel's face. He executes them summarily. It's not even close. Just boom, 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 one by one. He doesn't think. And this is our final sprint to the exit. We pick up Ellie, and we go. A bad ending can be had here, which I got a couple times, if Joel gets shot on the way out. Because as you're running, you obviously, which is clever, the game sets this up so you're not expecting something that comes up. You can't shoot while you're holding Ellie. You just run. And if the guards catch you, they kill you right there and then. And that's kind of a bad ending. But we don't, because we're pros. We make it to the elevator. And as the elevator goes down, it opens up, and Marlene is there, waiting, at gunpoint. She's got a gun.
You can't save her. Even if you get her out of here, then what? How long before she's torn to pieces by a pack of clickers? That is, if she hasn't been raped and murdered first.
It ain't for you to decide.
It's what she'd want. And you know it. Look. You can still do the right thing here. She won't feel anything.
This is as humane as we can do. Instant cut to Joel driving away. What were you thinking in that moment when it instantly cut to Joel driving away? Because for a moment, it just lingers on him. We don't know what happened. We know time has passed because it's daytime, and we know Joel is driving away, so he's not dead. So what were you thinking in this moment?
I'm thinking that Marlene died. Marlene is dead. I think Joel wrestled with it for maybe a millisecond and shoots her. That's what I'm thinking happens. And we do find out what happens. But in that moment, I think he's like, it's me and her against the world. And, you know, I don't think at this point anyone would have been able to sway Joel's decision here. Not Marlene, not Tess if she was alive, not Tommy, certainly not Bill. I think Joel's mind is made up and nothing's standing in his way.
Yeah, I think that is probably what most people assumed as well, right? They didn't show us Joel going through all of that just for him to give up at the end. I don't think anybody would have thought, oh, okay, Joel gave her up. You know, now he's just driving home, you know, chill with Tommy. We don't know. For a second, it you know, hangs on Joel's face, and we're not sure what happened until we hear Ellie stirring in the back. Joel escaped with her somehow. She's still out of it because the surgical drugs are wearing off. And Joel explains what happened. She asks, why am I wearing this? What happened? And Joel explains to her that they found the fireflies.
Turns out there's a whole lot more like you, Ellie. People that are immune. There's dozens, actually. Ain't done them a damn bit of good, neither. They've stopped looking for a cure.
And while he's spinning this little tale of his, we see what really happened. He shot Marlene dead while holding Ellie. You know, the game made it clear that while we were running, we couldn't shoot. But it shows us that Joel, underneath of Ellie, you know, while he's holding her up, he had his pistol handy. And he shot Marlene dead. And she begs to be let go. She says, like, you know, I don't remember, I didn't take it down exactly what she said, but presumably we can assume she's saying something to the effect of, like, please don't kill me, just go. Like, take her, just go. And Joel says, you'd just come after her. Boom.
It's brutal, but I feel like as the player and being Joel, and you're not on the stick, this is all cutscene here, but I feel like, this is what I would have done if I'm in Joel's shoes. And kind of feel bad for Marlene because she really is thinking rationally and trying her best to see the big picture here. But Joel is so narrow focused here. He's so narrow minded of, I'm just, this is my daughter and I'm going to do everything I can to keep her safe and protect her. It's wow. That's all I can say. It's just wow. Quick anecdote here though. If you'll indulge me, Rick, have you seen the alternate version of this scene? It's on YouTube.
I did not know that existed. No, I didn't.
So there's an alternate version that is in musical form.
Wait, musical like musical?
Like Joel Baker and Merle Dandridge actually sing their lines. It was a joke played on Troy Baker where they were filming this scene and Troy Baker kept dropping the gun and people are kind of getting frustrated. And in a moment of trying to make this thing comical, as Neil Druckmann explains it, he went over to Marlene's actress, Merle Dandridge, and said, hey, let's just throw Troy off his game here. Let's play a joke. Can you sing your lines? And there's a whole video of them on the mocap stage singing all of the lines here, and Troy Baker doesn't know what's happening at first, and then he just responds in kind, and it's actually really hilarious. I'll send you the link, and you can drop it in the show notes. It's really funny.
Oh my gosh, please do. That's terrific. I love when little inside jokes from productions like that come out. You know, that. Speaking of musicals, I mean, if anybody has ever seen a musical, I mean, you might not have noticed, but if you've ever acted in a musical or played in the pit, stuff like this happens all the time. It's just a great little nod, and you know, if the audience notices, that's great. But I love when little inside jokes like that can be included as bonus content. That's so cool. Please do. I will put it in the episode description if you send it to me.
Yeah, for sure, I will.
That's awesome. But we see the consequence of what happened here. Joel has chosen. He started this journey. Joel did, feeling resentful that this task has been put onto him, that he had cargo that he had to carry, deliver, to be the savior of this world. It was a nuisance to him. He didn't want to be doing it. This isn't who we are, Tess. And now he has actively chosen to forsake humanity's survival. Well, not survival, cure, let's say. They can survive. They can and do survive in the face of all of this. But he has actively chosen to give up the cure for humanity, exactly what he reprimanded Tommy for wanting to do, just so he could keep his second chance at fatherhood. Now, I say that in a loaded way, just so he can do that. If we're sitting back here as we are, like I said, in our gamer chairs, in our Lazy Boys, Racer X's, Steel Series, whatever, we can judge this detachedly. We can say, well, from a utilitarian perspective or from a humanitarian perspective, or I believe if we're viewing things under the social contract laid out by Rousseau, we can do all of this. For Joel, and if any of us were in this position, it is not that simple. We can't just write away, WRIT, the idea of what it means to love a child, right? That is an emotional weight that is heavier on the scales than any utilitarian lens. We can't just say, well, it is for the good of humanity, so take my daughter. It's not that simple.
Yeah.
And Joel has chosen, this is how I honor Sarah.
Right.
I get to do this again. I get to do right, one, by me as a father, but two, I get to honor Sarah's legacy, the life that she never had, by giving the best I can to Ellie. And then it comes up, and I mean, you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, John, but the question naturally populates, did Joel do the right thing? There is no right answer, but did he do the right thing?
Yeah, this is an interesting question. We already kind of talked about ethics 101, right? Sacrificing the few to save the many. I think I've always landed on the side of I would have made the same decision as Joel. But the other side of this equation was assuming as the player or as Joel or just as a bystander that the Fireflies actually had the means to mass produce the vaccine. Ellie was presumably the only Ellie is the only immune person that we know of within this world, right? So yes, Joel lied, but we have no inclination as to whether or not the Fireflies had the means to, one, actually have this be a successful surgery, and two, mass produce this vaccine. Remember Marlene's scene where she confronts Joel in the hospital. She says, hey, I crossed the U.S. just as you did, from Boston all the way to Salt Lake City, and she explicitly says, I lost more than half my crew along the way. We have no idea how many Fireflies are actually left. We know some tried to come from another city to initially get Ellie in Boston, but they were since found and taken out by Fedra. And every locale that we have been into in this game, we've seen Fireflies dead. So we have no idea how many are left and if they actually had the means to pull off this vaccine. And I think the decision that Joel makes, while it's selfish, is one that I would have made as the player, as a parent of two. And I don't think that Joel necessarily is a quote-unquote bad guy here or anything like that. But it's interesting to kind of take a step back and see, what would you do in this situation?
I'm glad that you're leaning on your reality as a parent whenever you're coming to this decision, John, because I think many of us that consider things like this, some folks might jump and say, well, that just leads you to bias. And from a certain perspective, sure, I guess, but it's a reality and an experience that cannot just be discounted in such a way. It's not something, and I say this as somebody that, one, doesn't have children, and two, doesn't want children. The relationship between a parent and a child, specifically if you are the parent, because all of us are children to a parent. We all have that relationship, right? If you're not, please reach out to me. We're going to talk to the government and I'm going to get a lot of money. but not all of us have children. And that is a relationship that even if you are like me and you do not have a child and do not want any, you cannot simply put yourself in that perspective. You can get 90% of the way there, you can get 95% of the way there, but that last 5% is pertinent. It is crucial. It is the marrow of what makes that entire relationship what it is, and we simply can't surmount it. So without that perspective, this conversation becomes a lot more dicey. What would you do? I think, John, I'm with you. I certainly don't blame Joel. Now, do I think, because I mean, you pointed out one wrinkle, and great observation, by the way. We don't know if the Fireflies could manage to pull this off. What if they only got enough of a cure to maybe cure one town, but then herd immunity doesn't actually work, and this was all for naught? Within 20 years, the quote-unquote, 20 years at best even, the quote-unquote cured are now dead, and we are back to square one. There is no guarantee that they would be able to pull this off, especially lacking the resources that we have now in a non-infected world in 2024. There is just simply no way. It's blind faith, right? And I would argue that gets even more dicey. But another wrinkle that this game purposefully, I think, does not explore because it would have made things a little too easy is Ellie's thoughts on all this. Yes, she does say, like, we've come all this way, it's not for nothing. Ellie does not know that she's going to die. She might be able to guess, we can speculate whether or not she figured, but she was never told you will die by doing this. And she never gets to, in part 1, that is to say, we do get to see this in part 2. And I am glad that they went the direction they did with her, with how she thinks about this in part 2, because again, part 2 does so many things really, really well. I can't wait to talk about it. I've never felt like more of an outsider hearing people say, this game sucks. But here in part 1, we don't know whether Ellie would have been okay with it. That is a crucial piece of information to have. Is she willing to give up her life to do this? We don't know. And that, along with what you said, John, the wrinkle of could they feasibly do this, that creates doubt. And I think that is enough doubt for anybody reasonable to say, wait a minute, are we acting rashly here? Should we rush into killing this girl for something that we might not even be able to do, and for something that may be against her wishes? We don't know. It's an interesting conversation. It's not one that we are going to quote unquote solve here on the podcast. I would love to continue this into this idea, what is right? How does one weigh these options? If you're not a member of the Discord, it is free to join. Please, by all means, jump in. We can talk about it. We can continue this conversation. There are so many resources out there and thinkers that are, maybe 1 or 2 steps above John and I that devote their whole lives to talking about ethics and what it means and so on and such forth. This conversation will never be over, but if you're not in the Discord, it is free to join. Let's continue the conversation there. For now, we've got one more scene. I can't imagine this game ending any other way. I think this was the only logical way it could have ended. The ending scene, which, by the way, we're in control of Ellie throughout this ending scene, which to me is lightly suggesting that this isn't the Joel that we know. Players don't control strangers. Who do players control? The good guys. That's right.
Right.
Now, I don't think the game is making a stance towards Joel. I'm just saying that I think more so that it's telling us that at the end of a video game, we don't control strangers. We control the protagonists, the people that we know, and we don't know Joel anymore, so we don't get to control him. And anyways,
Joel has a moment here where he name drops Sarah. You're kind of walking through the woods that overlook Tommy's town of Jackson, and he's like, Sarah and I used to go through hikes through woods like this all the time, and he kind of has this pause and says, I reckon you two would have been really good friends, even if they would have had a age difference. But Joel is in full on parent mode. I know we've been saying that for the last few sections here, but the fact that he name drops Sarah here and Ellie really doesn't engage in it, I think speaks volumes here.
Yeah, that's a good catch. They're walking towards, they're on foot, the road ends. They're just about at Tommy's, and Ellie stops Joel. It's very clear that Ellie has been thinking about something a lot. It seems like she's summoning all of her strength to talk to Joel, to open up to him. Again, signifying that idea that maybe they're not as close as we thought they were, because Joel isn't who we thought he was. Maybe, I don't know. When she was in Boston, she says, and she got bit, she wasn't alone. She talks about Riley, that this is the DLC. She kind of brings this up to Joel. All in all, it's showing that she's been thinking about this a long time.
Yeah.
This is suggesting that she maybe knew what her fate would have been. Maybe. And she makes one last demand here. She says this.
Swear to me that everything that you've said about the Fireflies is true.
And he says,
I swear.
Okay.
And it takes us to the credits. A perfect ending.
Yeah.
I mean, I could not, logically, this game couldn't have ended another way. And I love that they ended on such an ambiguous shot of Ellie. I mean, it's not ambiguous insofar as, like, I don't think any reasonable player would think to themselves, oh, she believes him. Happily ever after. Okay, who's ready for Baskin Robbins? Nobody is thinking this. It's showing us, it's leaving us on a bit of a cliffhanger, right? Like, we just saw their relationship switch flip whenever Joel consoled her after her horrifying encounter with David, whenever they got to the giraffes. We saw them turn into father and daughter. And now it's leaving us on this cliffhanger. Joel may have in this moment ruined their relationship. And credits roll. It's perfect.
And the music score just like swells and kicks in here. It's really good. I want to propose this question to you if I can, Rick. Do you think that Ellie knows he's lying here?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. I think most people lean that way. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I know that I said ambiguous. I don't think that she believes him at all.
Yeah, I think most people kind of feel that way. But I love that it's left ambiguous. I feel like, man, you could just... you could drive a truck through the pause that she takes to finally say, okay. It's such a ginormous like length of time. I feel like it's in real lifetime it's maybe a 3 or 5 second thing, but it feels like it's years, right? And just that pan to her face when she says okay, like my interpretation of that has always been that one, she knows, okay, you just lied to me. But the flip side, or I guess the second point of that, is you're lying to me for a reason. We've spent enough time together now. I've known you for a year. Like, I think she kind of just goes, okay, you have your reasons. You've been protecting me. We've gone through a whole shitload of shit at this point. So I'm just going to trust you. I'm angry, but I think I trust you still. That's just always kind of been my interpretation of it anyway.
And I think that little supplement that you added is important to note. Like, she can understand that Joel has his reasons. That doesn't mean that she has to agree with it or with him. I think in that moment, whenever, I mean, think back to any time we're arguing with somebody, right? I'm sure that we both do all the time. But so when you're arguing with somebody that just will not listen and is just repeating their line of the argument, let's say, this is just an example, and they're not listening to you, they're just waiting for their turn to speak, and you don't have the energy to fight them anymore. You want this to be over and you can try again another day. What do? You just say, okay, whatever, you're right. All right, okay, sure. That's what Ellie's doing here. She's shutting it down. She doesn't have the energy to fight with Joel on this because of everything they've just been through. I mean, of course she knows that he's not telling the truth. but now is not the time, right? I mean, I cannot imagine how exhausted she is. She's been through more than Joel, and he has like double and then some of her age, right? Maybe even triple her age. She's got to be just fucking tired. And her saying, okay, I think also too, I think that line is indicative too. I know I kind of said this before, but their relationship now is kind of, it's never going to recover, I think, from this point. And, you know, spoiler alert for part 2, fast forward like 30 seconds if you don't want to hear it, it doesn't recover.
No.
Ellie spends a lot of time grieving for various reasons over their relationship not recovering.
Yeah.
Okay, spoilers over. Spoilers over right now.
Yeah.
I mean, if you fast forwarded, you might have just gone past this anyway, so what's the point? But
you brought up a good point about Ellie kind of being this teenager here and not just wanting to fight it. I feel like, you know, Ellie's had so many moments in this game where she is a teenager and kind of had like a whatever attitude, but I love that she's matured so much in this moment, and this simple word, this one word ending of just okay, really shows a full, maybe not a full, but a level up and maturation, I think, for Ellie. And I dig it. She's like, okay, and tomorrow we'll start again. You know, this doesn't need to be as, you know, same shit, different day thing. We'll just try tomorrow. And I think it shows a maturation, which I love.
yeah, it totally does. She has grown immeasurably in this time. And Joel has grown too, but not in the same way, I don't think. It would be interesting to revisit this after playing at least through a bit of, well, no, actually playing through the entirety of part 2. I think fuck, there's no way to talk about this. I think there is a scene in the beginning where a lot of folks would say, okay, their relationship is done, it's over. But I think the ending is where you finally get to see, in part 2, that is to say, see Ellie's true, a glimpse into Ellie's true thoughts on the relationship. And I think that ending scene is, one, extremely good. Well, actually now I'm thinking back, it might be the scene before the ending scene. I don't quite remember. But I think it's very good. And I think it kind of, it takes time for Ellie to come to terms with her and Joel. But here, I'm with you. This ending on such a one note, one word, 2-syllable ending, it's great. It's perfect.
Go play this game, people, if you haven't. It's amazing.
Yeah, I can imagine. You know, I shared this in another Discord. You know, Discord is full of self-promotion. I have a lot of mixed feelings about self-promotion. I think a lot about just taking that channel away in my server, because like I don't think anybody discovers shows that way.
Sure.
But well, and you know that it's more complicated than that. But I'm not going to take it away. But I posted this episode, part 2, in another server, or excuse me, part 1 in another server, and somebody was like, "Wow, somebody doing a deep dive on The Last of Us in 2024," and they were like incredulous that, you know, this game was still being talked about. So I think, you know, John, I agree with you. If you haven't played this game, definitely play it. I would venture to guess that most people have, or at least most folks that like this kind of thing. But yeah, I echo what John said. If you haven't played this game, definitely play it. Or, you know, if you have a spouse, a partner, a brother, sister, kid that, oh God, don't play this with your parents or children. That would be emotionally very taxing. But if you have a loved one that you could play this with or watch them play, I think that would be just as fun too. You know, this game functions great as a, you know, not as well, not at 100%, but it functions great as a watch somebody else play it on the couch kind of deal.
Oh yeah.
And that's that. You know, from here, where do we go? We do a patron episode on the show. We could, I mean, obviously we're going to do part 2 eventually. I mean, we're not going to rush to it right away, because that would be wildly unfair of me to ask for John. But we will get to it. It is for sure going to happen. And do you know, John, if there are any future games in this universe that are coming out, or has the show ended? Like, what's the deal? What's the future of this franchise look like?
Okay, so I'll start with the game. So Naughty Dog currently is in development on up to 2 different projects, and while we do not know full details of either one, it has been speculated now since 2020, basically, when Part 2 came out, that Last of Us Part 3 is in development. It has not been officially confirmed, but numerous leakers have said it's in development. And as far as the show, Season 2 is supposed to be dropping early part of next year, 2025. I think I saw something that said March or April. And we know it's going to cover, presumably, only a portion of Part 2, because Season 1 covered all of this game and up to the end, and then Season 2 is a much bigger game, Part 2 is a much bigger game, so Season 2 of the show is going to cover up to, we don't know full details yet of what Season 2 is going to cover for the show, but I am excited and cannot wait.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. I can't remember if I said this. I started watching Part 1 of The Last of Us Season 1. I don't know. I turned it off like, I want to say 40 minutes in, just because I think I was going to bed or something. I just never got back to it. I know I want to, though. I definitely want to. And I look forward to seeing how Season 2 plays out and the general reception. And, from here, maybe we do the DLC. We will do Part 2, maybe an episode on the show. Who knows? But it'll be exciting. And it'll be exciting to see how the universe of this game pans out, if they keep going. So, but until then, John, thank you once again for joining me. I know this was no small feat, doing 3 episodes, roughly 6 hours, maybe a little more. So thank you, major thank you. I'm sure the listeners are happy as well to have somebody on the show that knows the game so much better than I do, quite frankly. As for the Video Game Lounge podcast, any news and updates since we have last heard from you? What's new over there?
So we have our 3rd episode out at the time of this recording, which is the top 6 games we have sunk the most hours into. So for myself, I was able to kind of scour my PlayStation profile and see just kind of what my top 6 games that I've sunk the most hours into. And then my co-host Elias did the same through his Steam and Xbox accounts. So really fun episode, really cool talk. And just to circle back, I want to say thank you for having me on. This was an absolute blast and pleasure to talk about one of just my absolute favorite games of all time. I will gladly come back for anything else you do that is related to The Last of Us, whether it be the games, the show, anything. So I appreciate you. Thank you, Rick.
Hey, no problem. I mean, the pleasure was mine. I saw whenever you posted your episode, the episode art for the most hours sunk into a game had Disco Elysium on it, which excited me. I'm actually looking at my Steam library now. I have got 93 hours into Disco, which is roughly like 3 playthroughs and change. Unfortunately, the number 1 game, if we're just counting Steam and not Epic or PlayStation, is Rocket League at 920 hours. Unfortunately,
that does not top my number 1. You'll have to listen. I have close to 1,000 hours into my number 1 game for that episode. Geez.
Number 2, just for folks listening for me, is Final Fantasy IX, and just on Steam, that's 210 hours. That is not including PS1, PS2, Switch, whatever. That's going to be fun. I will definitely check that episode out. Have not had a moment to listen to a ton of podcasts recently, but I will be sure to check that one out. Listeners, you can check that out as well by checking out the Video Game Lounge podcast. You can find their links in the description, as always. In addition to their links, which, by the way, includes their socials and whatnot, you can also find links to Pixel Project Radio on the web. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Discord, as I mentioned, which is free to join, by the way. There's also the Patreon, if you feel so inclined to support that way. You can find everything in the description, as well as the sources for this episode. Not a ton, just a couple. I'll also include that link to the musical, The Last of Us, the musical, that John sends my way. You can also, please do hit up those ratings and reviews. I do not know how podcast algorithms work. I don't think anybody that isn't actively working on them knows 100%, but I'm pretty sure that posting weekly has now put me up higher in the algorithm. And you know what else does is ratings and reviews. So if you would be so kind, you can do that on wherever it lets you, really. Spotify, Apple, Podcast Addict, wherever. I've mentioned before I'm going to stop reading reviews on the show because it just felt a little bit too self-congratulatory to me, and that made me a little uncomfortable. But please know that I still read them, and it still makes me very, very, very happy. And sometimes I post them. You know, I post them in the Discord or online if they're very nice. But you can do all of that. Everything you need from me, from Video Game Lounge, is in the description. I have been waffling on long enough, so it's time to end this episode. John, thank you once again. Listeners, thank you for sticking around until the end. I am Rick. I am your host, as always, and we'll catch you next time.